And what we're trying to do with Layer Cake is to provide essentially a way for the risk to the user to be moved away from the user to people who are better able to bear it. So it acts like insurance in that way. We think that's important. You have to get rid of the risk to the user if you want to scale blockchain in the long term.
And Layer Cake is an insurance protocol, and you're always guaranteed to get your value back. Same with the F-asset system. So this is why it's very low risk, everything that they're building here.
Let's get started.
Welcome to MickeyBFresh.com.
So what is Layer Cake? Layer Cake is a secure and scalable cross-chain protocol that solves some of the biggest problems inherent in bridging. It leverages Flare to safely and trustlessly bridge assets between any two smart contract layer ones. Layer Cake also enables F-assets to flow to any other smart contract chain. So Layer Cake is, over this period of time, from the time they didn't launch last summer in 2021 till now, they've been able to develop this Layer Cake system. So it's not like we're waiting around and nothing has happened. This is a very powerful system, probably one of the most powerful protocols that have ever built in all of crypto, because it's able to create the connection to 100 blockchains. Instead of building 4,950 bridges, which bilateral, which multi-chain and wormhole are all trying to do, and you have all these bilateral bridges, Flare is able to do this with 101 smart contracts. And this is going to be very powerful in the future when dApps can connect to all these other blockchains by launching on Flare, and it's secured by Flare. So the transfers don't necessarily have to go through Flare, but it's secured by Flare. So Flare's consensus out the gate is going to be decentralized, but it's going to become even more decentralized and even stronger once they implement the Flare consensus protocol, which is coming in the future.
So why is it that Layer Cake is referred to as an insurance protocol? And the reason being is that it acts like insurance. So there's insurance that covers the bridge for reorg attacks, and then there's the initial collateral that's backing the initial asset. But long term, there are no collateral requirements. And this is similar to the insurance industry. Now, there's collateral that needs to be held by the bandwidth providers on Flare. So this is going to have an impact on FLR and the demand for FLR. And this is something very important that is built into the design. So those who are going to be moving across the bridge, they don't have anything to do with FLR unless they're bridging to Flare. And there will be a lot of bridging to Flare. They pay the native asset in fees. And this whole fee model is very important for blockchain because it is how the industry is able to create business models and bring in new types of institutions, entities, and new types of enterprises that will develop and provide services. Because the one thing about Flare's protocols, and this is important to the core of what decentralization and trustlessness is, and it's the safety, the fact that you don't have to trust anybody. But at the same time, this design is not like other bridges where it's like one-to-one, you lock it on this network and then you issue it there. It does not work like that. That's not going to work on a long-term scale for cross-chain bridges because it's going to inherently, it leaves a honeypot. We've seen hacks, and it doesn't really create any type of business model for the bandwidth providers or for whoever's operating of the bridge. Now, the Layer Cake bridge protocol is one protocol that can be built utilizing the state connector and other protocols that are composable with it, like a relayer. Like it needs a light client relay for like once a week. And the FTSO is another protocol that is a foundational component of this cross-chain interoperability insurance system that Flare is building. But they've fundamentally created a bridge mechanism and design that's different than anything else out there. And as Hugo says in the video, it's been overlooked because this idea of collateral requirements and all of that has been something that seems maybe more risky on the surface, but is actually with a ecosystem of DeFi that has boomed, and you could see that you get the right entities there providing bandwidth. They're going to then have a business model because remember,
we've taken a lot of, I guess, inspiration from the traditional financial system to try and make, to conceptualize and build products that are just like better than others. Right. So our bridges and the bridging model I described to you earlier, it takes this idea that ultimately you pay a fee to the person operating the bridge, but they pay you out if they are corrupt. Right. If they steal your money from the bridge holds their money, and a smart contract can verify that they've stolen your money, and you get bailed out with their money directly. So this is exactly the model we're looking to kind of, I guess, put forward in crypto, which is you want to do something exotic, like move between chains, when chains were never built to be moved between. Then, you pay the toll, but you get safety. And I think that's a fairly natural model, right?
Yeah.
To be honest with you, the banking industry may have collapsed many times, but I don't think the insurance industry has.
It's a good point.
But that's why you've got to pay for it, right? You're essentially, the insurance is being provided by someone else's money. You've got to pay an interest rate on that. And ultimately, everything has to harmonize to whatever else is available in the world. And traditional finance is available. And if people aren't paying fees in crypto, and they are paying fees in crypto, then essentially people won't deploy capital to crypto unless they can make a equal return adjusted for risk relative to traditional finance. So, if your volatility in traditional finance is X and your volatility in crypto is Y, then, adjusted for that volatility, you have to be able to make essentially the same return, if not slightly higher, in order to attract capital to crypto. And that's the model we're looking to really kind of put forward into the system, certainly with layer cake bridging.
Decentralization and trustlessness and it's the safety, the fact that you don't have to trust anybody. But at the same time, this design is not like other bridges where it's like one-to-one, you lock it on this network and then you issue it there. It does not work like that. That's not going to work on a long-term scale for cross-chain bridges because it's going to inherently, it leaves a honeypot. We've seen hacks, and it doesn't really create any type of business model for the bandwidth providers or for whoever's operating of the bridge. Now, the Layer Cake Bridge protocol is one protocol that can be built utilizing the state connector and other protocols that are composable with it, like a relayer. Like it needs a light client relay for like once a week. And the FTSO is another protocol that is a foundational component of this cross-chain interoperability insurance system that Flare is building. But they've fundamentally created a bridge mechanism and design that's different than anything else out there. And as Hugo says in the video, it's been overlooked because this idea of collateral requirements and all of that has been something that seems maybe more risky on the surface, but is actually with a ecosystem of DeFi that has boomed, and you could see that you get the right entities there providing bandwidth. they're going to then have a business model, because remember, if they're holding FLR, they're earning from the FTSO. So that's something to keep in mind. And it's like an insurance company. Big insurance companies, they invest the money that they're going to use to provide as payout in case of a claim. So that's the same thing that's going to similar happen here. Now, of course, you have the decentralization aspect of it, not the centralized, but you get a group of bandwidth providers who then compete, and
they manage their risk pretty well, right? They keep a certain amount of cash on hand to pay out. But if they're not putting that money to work, then they won't be able to cover the risks that they've insured in the future, because they're only insuring risks based on a premium and also an assumption on how much their capital pool is going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And anything if you look at, say, Berkshire Hathaway, which is essentially a vast business conglomerate that has largely been built on the back of a very large and successful insurance company. And essentially what they did was that they insured risks at a sensible premium, took that, took that income, deployed it into things they thought were massively undervalued, or a portion of that income, put it into things they thought were massively undervalued. And over 50 years have built one of the largest companies in the world. Like it's actually a really great business.
Mm.
And what we're, I guess, looking to do is we're looking to allow people to deploy their ETH, their USDC, their USDT as collateral into bridges for which they earn the bridging fee. And so essentially they get an income from the collateral they're sitting on. And the bridge itself is providing a service.
how are these going to be integrated? Is it going to be single users using them? Probably not. The majority of the volume will end up running through people just wanting to use the bridge. It'll be dApps. It'll be integrated into the back-end proving system. And what that allows for is a fluent experience and frictionless that the user could just do from a single interface. I don't know how Layer Cake is going to be set up in that way, but conceptually, it's very similar to the F-Asset system in that it's collateral. It's being double collateralized for the time that it's over the bridge. So while it's there, there's a chance of reorg attack. And if that happened, you wouldn't get your asset back, and they would roll it back to the time from prior, and you would have no assets then. And this covers you in insurance, so there's no risk. It removes every risk possible that could take place so that the user doesn't have to bear those risks. And that's what's important about the system. At the same time, though, you're going to pay a fee. Now, the fees are fees. They might be a little more for the idea of reserving collateral and for being able to move over a bridge that's that secure.
We're looking to allow people to deploy their ETH, their USDC, their USDT as collateral into bridges for which they earn the bridging fee. And so essentially they get an income from the collateral they're sitting on. And the bridge itself is providing a service.
Mm-hmm.
And they can roll that income back into the bridge or into other products or whatever. But, it's a very simple model.
Yeah.
It's one that has been, deeply overlooked.
But then it's really you're moving to all one type of asset. So there's only 101 smart contracts, which means you're not going to have 5 different Ethereums. It's like this type of Ethereum on Solana, that type of Ethereum on AVAX, this type on Flare. There's just one type. And that's going to create an ecosystem. And this is what's coming. So it's not here yet. And this is where you have to have the vision to be able to see what's the next thing. Because this is all about Web3 infrastructure. And what Flare is building is inherently for what hasn't been built out yet. And what's going to allow for those real world, use cases that are going to explode the ecosystem. And one thing that's missing is data. You can't execute a contract based on some outside data source. That limits the applications. So by being able to, for the state connector, which is deterministic data, non-probabilistic, means it's a fact that yes or no, that happened. That's what the state connector is able to read. So any open database from the internet, a contract or from another network. So a contract can execute on Flare or on Solana based on some event that took place on Ethereum. That you cannot do right now. There's no dApps doing that. So this is not feasible. But that opens a ton of use cases, especially for DeFi. So they're building this foundational infrastructure. And how are they able to do this?
Consensus protocol for proving events, so non-price, so non-probabilistic events onto a blockchain. So for instance, that example I said earlier, which is, Mike has sent some Bitcoin to Hugo on the Bitcoin chain, prove that onto Flare so that can trigger something in a smart contract. And from those two protocols, a huge amount of things can be built. All types of different bridges, all types of different messaging services across chain, because you can then set up, an example of a protocol that can be built using Flare is a simple relay protocol, whereby relay nodes are external to a blockchain and they sit between blockchain to relay data to different chains. But how do you secure them? Well, you can secure them by staking them on Flare and then using Flare to prove what happened on chain A, what message was delivered to chain B, and then if the relay node has lied about that message, you can slash that node because they're staked on Flare. And you can slash that node because essentially Flare can prove what has happened on both chains. And to us, these two protocols, price and stake, so proving, coming to an agreement over what the price of something is and coming to consensus over what the state of another blockchain is. These are kind of like the primitives to build a really wide array of very robust interoperability protocols, starting with bridges and relays, all types of different bridge, however you want to structure them. We have our own thoughts about how to do that, but anyone can come and build a bridge using Flare. Anyone can come and build a relay building Flare, can structure it however they like. And that's sort of our thesis. Flare is a layer for enabling interoperability between lots of different chains.
Because of the state connector system, the consensus, the fact that it doesn't use proof of stake. This is where all the proof of stake networks they're just going to inherently struggle because they weren't designed to do that. So you have no other collateral than to use because it's already being staked. And then you can't create a bridge that's more than 33% of that stake is at risk then going over. So they inherently are going to need to, even though anyone can be a bandwidth provider, there are certain designs, just like the XRP Ledger. Yes, it's getting more decentralized now and over time goes by, but inherently you have to get the right players there and entities from the beginning. Now that's not to say that you can't operate as a bandwidth provider. Do you have the tech know-how and the risk appetite to do that and feel comfortable? Probably not. Most retail is going to be. Will there be some kind of DAO or other protocol that's going to do that? Possibly, yes. And he talks about an insurance DAO that would come in and do that. Now, we don't know every design component of Layer Cake because this is now a protocol that Flare, the team, is building. Not part of Flare Network, but a lot of the activity and the collateral will be held on Flare. FLR is native to Flare, so it's held on Flare. ETH is native to Ethereum. It's held on Ethereum. That's the native asset. So when somebody comes to redeem, it's a similar process to the F assets. They have to then, it could be a different entity holding that asset. Say it's issued ETH on Solana and they swapped it to somebody else on Solana. And now that person wants to take it to Cosmos or to Avalanche. They go through the same process. They put up collateral reservation and then it gets issued over there. But it's the same asset in a sense. So in a way, it's like an abstracted layer. Because remember, none of these assets actually move off their native chains. They're always on the native chain, but it's the value representation of them that is those issued assets, and to be able to move frictionlessly and trustlessly back and forth. So bandwidth providers have a business model now. So they're inherently motivated to drive more bandwidth so that more assets can move across the bridges. And with that comes then the back safety fail-safes, which is if a bandwidth provider did something that was malicious, then they're going to get their collateral that they have extra slashed, and inherently they take a loss. Just as the same with the F-asset system. If somebody doesn't redeem your XRP, they're getting slashed. It's a little different than the F-asset system, but inherently it's Flare, FLR, that's going to be is going to not have to be used by the bandwidth providers the whole time, just for that initial insurance. But then there's a longer term, and that's where, well, you're going to hold the asset that earns, and you earn with it. So and it earns the FTSO rewards. And then if you could create the same kind of model like insurance, and as he explained with Berkshire Hathaway, that they've built up all this funds and then they invested them. So in a way, I'm not saying that the bandwidth provider is going to go out and invest it in stocks, but they're going to be able to deploy that premium that they're holding. So instead of it just being locked in a smart contract doing nothing, it could then be utilized to be earned, and earning more so that they get in a system where they can't default on anything. And if they do, they get slashed, and somebody else is going to come in and provide the collateral. And all it does is just potentially slow the bridge down. And this is a fundamentally different system. And you're probably like, this is complicated. Yes. All you need to understand really is that this is going to create a foundation for cross-chain dApps and for different entities to come to the space. Not every institution or hedge fund or this are coming in just to buy an asset and hope it moons. That is not what the space is about. You might be here because of that, but that is not inherently what's being developed here. It's important to understand there's Web3 infrastructure. That's what this is. Web3 infrastructure. And it builds a business model for these bandwidth providers. And, ultimately they could be just autonomous agents that just manage collateral and do this, do that. And they could be all AI, down the road. Initially, I don't know if they're going to start like that, but then there'll be an insurance collateral. So more details to come, and it's in development, but fundamentally it's going to be a basis for dApps to build cross-chain and connect to Flare. So we'll have an inherent advantage. Now, this is going to take time. So things that are built on Flare are not going to happen in 1, 2, 3 months and be like, explode the price. Price is not always a good measure of a value of a network or the success, especially in the short term. So price is obviously relevant because it determines what you could accumulate wise. And it's also a factor if you ever sell, but unrealized losses mean nothing. And especially when you're earning. So in the beginning, there's going to be a lot of supply coming out, and it's to incentivize this ecosystem. But what's different about what Flare's doing is there's multiple incentives. So every layer cake asset minted earns some of FLR. So in a way, this is going to bring more people into the ecosystem, because this isn't earning some random bridge token. This is earning an L1 token that's going to end up being a blue chip. And it is a data provisioning network, but the native token's primary use case, because of its characteristics, are as collateral, because it earns FTSO rewards no matter where it is. It could always delegate. It always has governance rights. And in the beginning, it's going to have the distribution. So that means for 3 years, holding that FLR as collateral is going to be one of the very few L1s that we're not talking a 4% APY like Solana or Cardano that are trying to do that. We're talking decent sums depending on participation rate Now, as that participation rate starts climbing and climbing, it goes from 10% to 15%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, which is roughly around where it is on Songbird now, maybe a little higher recently. And ultimately, it should climb to 80% plus. That means those assets aren't going on exchanges to be traded because inherently there's so much to do. Because now let's look at all the different roles. You have the role of being bandwidth providers, and they break it down, and Kinetic Capital and Block Demon, they discussed already, operating as bandwidth providers, and then offering that software that a bandwidth provider would need. Because let's think what a bandwidth provider would really need. I mean, they would need a multi-network enterprise-grade wallet to be able to move through all those different assets and being able to issue them and then back to Flare. So there's certain types of infrastructure that they're going to need when it comes to moving assets around that will make it more effective of a bandwidth provider. Now, that's not to say a DAO can't do this or a protocol directly goes into there, because all these opportunities for yield, it's not just about other retail seeing it, and it's not about institutions even just seeing it. It's about other protocols being built to then be able to tap into that yield and then use that in their protocol in what they're doing. And you could be part of that protocol, it could be not. It could be anything. I do think we get to in a very near future, a world of smart lockers where the risk profile is covered by the user, who can then pull a lever and lower risk and higher risk. And this opens up a massive world for derivatives. So everyone likes to talk about derivatives and DTCC and all that stuff, but that's not what derivatives are that we're going to see in the near future. That's all distraction. This is real derivatives. The F asset system is like perfectly set for a futures market and a synthetics market. You could create so many different types of traditional assets. And he says we borrow from the traditional market in this sense of insurance. And in reality, they're also not disclosing full details. I think this is just speculation on my part, that they don't want to give away to competition exactly the design of the bridge, even though nobody has a state connector, nobody has an Oracle system to do like Flare's. They could try to do it and try to copy, maybe with their own little Oracle system, and it won't be at FTSOs, and some kind of state connector where it's like a multi-sig says this is on that blockchain. So it can be copied to a extent, but creating the ecosystem out, having the native asset as yield bearing, you can't just make that happen. And if it's some no-name token, especially a DApp token, that's the last thing you're going to want, securing long-term collateral on a multi-network, multi-chain DApp ecosystem that dApps can either build on Flare or with Flare or both. And keep in mind, Flare team is a participant and an infrastructure provider. So they can operate as a bandwidth provider, and they most likely will. It's a trustless system. They don't have control over it. They can't tell people to shut down. They can't seize assets. That's so important. And we're going to talk about more, but institutional DeFi, think of that word. What does that mean to you? It's decentralized finance. It's not institutional hybrid finance or hi-fi or trade-fi. It's decentralized finance. So what does that mean to you? Because it's not the definition that has been defined until recently. And that's the area where crypto projects as a whole, because there's obviously the creator team. Now they give out grants to bring in infrastructure providers who then become part of the ecosystem. Here are the roles. Bandwidth providers, you have attesters who are part of the state connector, and you have agents, and then you have FTSO providers, and then you have validators. Those are all separate entities with really only the FTSOs and the attesters truly earning native network rewards from Flare. But the agents and the bandwidth providers are able to earn the native token of the network that the assets are coming over from. And those are going to be top blue chip cryptos. And you want to earn foreign currency. You want to earn Ethereum. You want to earn AVAX. You want to earn Cardano. So it's going to be interesting to see how they roll this out. Since we've had this extra time, there's no details in either system, but F-Assets were basically ready to go last year. So when you think about it, they've probably just tweaked it to enhance it. One, to upgrade from probably the initial design slightly. But since F-Assets can accept layer cake assets as collateral, that makes things very interesting if you're a bandwidth provider. Because now that opens up the possibility for some interesting scenarios. And that's a yield-bearing asset. So now that that minted then layer cake asset to be used as collateral. So somebody could mint an asset, like say we're minting, Cardano, for example, right? So we get layer cake Cardano ADA. That's now earning yield at a higher rate than the proof of stake network natively. And now it's also able to into earning yield on Flare. And the powerful thing about having these yield bearing assets, and it's great for like the early stage, airdrop and XRP community, but we're just one foundational component here. This is going to take time to develop, but it is very rare you have built this level of institutional enterprise grade, trustless, decentralized protocols that are solving specific problems. The state connector is able to pull data in from any other blockchain and then prove it on Flare with a backstop.
Huge amount of things can be built. All types of different bridges, all types of different messaging services across chain, because you can then set up, an example of a protocol that can be built using Flare is a simple relay protocol, whereby relay nodes are external to a blockchain and they sit between blockchain.
Because of the API design and the way they're connecting all of them together. So that's kind of like still on the radar, but the state connector is still pretty powerful and most accurate, but there's a backstop. And then with the F-Asset system, you're locking up collateral. So all of this uses FLR. So important. So when you see rewards, you want to accumulate. That's the strategy early on. The price, it doesn't really even, people will get emotionally attached to it. This, if they bought higher and it went down, you just look at accumulating. Not financial advice, but know what we're looking at here. There's only 2 exchanges, I think, left, or 3 that haven't said publicly that they're going to release Flare, but it's pretty much a given. So Coinbase and I think Binance US. So we're getting close to the point where this is unprecedented. There's nothing even close, like even remotely close, that comes close to this scale of an airdrop. And then they're basically, exchanges aren't used to being told when to list a asset. So they probably want to list assets, but going through listing assets takes a process of security teams, compliance. They have to approve it. They have to investigate the project. Now you're probably saying like, well, you had 2 years to do that, exchanges. And they did. But Flare has, changed certain things along the way. And as the creators of the network, they are entitled to, especially if nobody invested, entitled to change it any way they want. Pass the validating power off to these professional infrastructure providers, and then they'll pass off into the regular nodes. And I think this is where it becomes powerful, really powerful. The branching protocol.
Get out here is that there's a plan to connect everything together. They're not just saying that as a tagline. It's just, oh yeah, we're going to try to do that. No, they have a plan and a way to do that. And this layer cake protocol allows for that. Everything behind the design of Flare is purposely built. So just the mechanism designs by having the ability to earn FLR from the FTSO. So you earn from delegating your votes. And then you put up FLR as collateral, and you're able to earn those outside currencies. So being able to earn XRP, being able to earn Bitcoin, this gives it real economic value and utility, because now Flare as collateral is earning that. And how is it doing it? Because of the fees that are being paid by those who mint, who borrow collateral. And we're still waiting for some minor details on the dynamic collateral pool and agent system.
Because there's one smart contract, it issues one standard token, and it's all secured by Flare. It doesn't necessarily have to flow through Flare, but it's secured by Flare, and the smart contract issues just one representation of wrapped ETH coming from any other connected chain. And that means that rather than fragmenting liquidity, we're unifying it. And that's really very valuable. And so in a world of proliferating chains, parachains, subnets, side nets, and supernets, Flare can connect everything.